don't know. I'm not the one. Okay, there we go. All right, got it.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. Um, so my parents encouraged me to love and learn about nature. So by the time I was 8, I had my own insect collection in lab boxes, complete with Latin names. And I never lost my interest in bugs. So I spent all my spare time beside the river pretending I was a great National Geographic explorer. So from insect collection, I went on to learn about the plants they lived on, and then I fell in love with trees. In the meantime, my mom was teaching me to sew, and I fell in love with a box of scraps. And although I was never a good seamstress, I really liked the embellishing part. And so that's how I discovered embroidery, by buying a kit from some garage sale or something like that. And I did kit after kit after kit, way into my teens and right up to university. So when it did come to choosing what I was going to do with my post-secondary education, I didn't know there was such a thing as textile art. And I didn't know you could be a professional artist at all. That wasn't really my background. So I thought about the 3 things I loved most: trees, nature, and art. And so ornamental horticulture seemed to have it all. I went to the University of Guelph and got a Bachelor of Science in agriculture with a major in ornamental horticulture. And I'm not going to tell you what year I graduated, but sometime in the last century. So it's been a while. But that was just the beginning of my learning, because it taught me the science, but there's so much more to trees than just what's in the science. So this girl was one of the lucky few who landed a summer job at the University of Guelph Arboretum. I pruned, I hoed, I planted, I collected seed, I propagated dozens of native species, and I got to know them really, really well. I don't know if you can find me in here, but actually I'm going to tell you. This motley crew were my workmates, and that's me in the overalls on the bottom left, looking like the kid you took to work. Take your kid to work day. This was actually the best job I ever had. We had a common religion and we had a common language, and that language was trees. So after my undergrad years, I moved to London, Ontario, and I joined the amazing Canadian Embroiderers Guild, as I mentioned before. I continued to learn more techniques there because there was lots of teaching going on, and they brought in teachers from all over the world to teach these 2-week workshops in the summer, which was just amazing, because that's where I saw that you could actually have a career in textile art. These teachers were professionals, and not only did they teach us techniques, but I could see they were making a living at what they did, and they were making a difference in the world, which is 2 things that I really cared about. So, and I don't know, maybe it's hard to tell, but I'm very much an introvert. And this group gave me a chance to teach classes and speak publicly and do things that I never imagined I could do. And so I owe them so much more than just teaching me techniques. And the Guild is still running now in London, Ontario. And also there's a branch in Guelph, and they are both still going. So if you guys want to join them or to go to one of their open houses that they have once a year, then I definitely encourage you to do that. The career transition from horticulture, because I was working in horticulture then, working in nurseries and that kind of thing. But like the real change for me came the day that I sold my first piece. And this is it here. I'm very sorry I don't have any close-ups of this because it's just a photo of a print, but this is needlepoint, 144 stitches per square inch. And some of the fabric in there, or some of the threads in there, were threads that I created myself and dyed myself. The grass, the crown of the tree, the trunk of the tree were all hand spun by me. So the number of hours in this easily outdistances anything I do now. Probably, I don't know, 500, 600 hours to make this piece. Anyway, I sold it. I got the money and I ran out and I bought another piece of art with it. that I still have. It's a sculpture. And I still, every time I look at it, I think about this first piece that I sold. Anyway, it's called Piccadilly Sunday because I was living on Piccadilly Street in London at that time. This is not a photo of Piccadilly Street at all. It's just an imagined thing, but I wanted to honor the fact that I loved Piccadilly Street. It was great. So I went through all kinds of phases and I tried every technique and lots of imagery. And over time, I started to gravitate more and more towards trees and work around trees because it was pretty obvious. I mean, I had training in trees, right? But they're also beautiful and they're infinitely varied. I mean, look at this. This is a willow tree, completely different from any other kind of tree that you can see. Every part of the tree is full of detail, amazing detail from root to leaf, and even on the microscopic level. They're crucial for the environment because they're so big above and below the ground that they stabilize their surroundings. And there's the funny fact that they process carbon dioxide to create oxygen. They shade the Earth's surface and they provide food and nourishment and shelter for organisms, including us. In art, the trees offer never-ending directions to go. Aesthetic, scientific, emotional, spiritual, it goes on. And trees are found in the stories of cultures from every major culture, actually from ancient times till now. So they're really important and a really excellent subject for art. And as Thomas More says, trees provide a rudimentary lesson in enchantment. So now I'm going to walk through a few projects that I did, started in 2002 with Saving Paradise, which was my first touring exhibition. So that happened 16 years after that first sale. That's how long it takes to become a professional artist. It's not like, oh, I make this amazing piece of work and, I came out of nowhere. Usually it means quite a long time of working behind the scenes. And I'm still working behind the scenes now. I really love working in series. It's kind of like a puzzle and putting all the elements together to make a whole. So you'll recall that I was working as a technician at the University of Guelph Arboretum. While I was there, I fell in love with a native tree collection that they had. In fact, the Arboretum was maintaining what they call a living gene bank that was helping preserve 17 designated rare and endangered Carolinian species, which all actually grow in the area that we are here, Southern Ontario. And that became the theme of my first major exhibition. I got a really good grant from the Ontario Arts Council, for which I'm still very grateful, which allowed me to take 9 months, which is the time needed to do the research, and then most of which I did at the Arboretum. And then after that, it took another year to make the 17 pieces. And I also made 17 pieces of the seeds of those pieces because I had a space that was too big for just that grouping. And I thought, well, I might as well just fill it up, right? So I made the seeds too. That exhibition toured from 2002 to 2003 to 13 different public venues in Ontario. Yeah, I picked out a couple of my favorites for you. So this is Ohio buckeye, Aesculus parva. That tree grows in the wild only on Walpole Island in Lake St. Clair. And the theory is that the First Nation settlers brought them over for their own use. They'd grind up the nuts of this tree and use it as a toxic powder to stun fish so that they could fish. So you can see the little fish. I don't know if you can see my arrow here. The little fish in the corner here. And that's why I put them there. And the nuts were also carried in the pocket for luck. Now, I don't know. That may just be a story, but I thought it was interesting. I really love the gorgeous fall color of this tree. And I actually bought one myself, and I have one on this property. And it's easily as bright as what you can see here. It's just blindingly bright in the fall. A gorgeous tree. Now, if you barely see it down here, but there's a Latin name in the corner. And that's there because, I love Latin. I took Latin in high school, and I might as well make good use of it. And it really helped me learn the Latin names of the trees because we had to do that at university. The Latin names are really important. And the Latin names actually tell you a lot about some information about the trees. So, and this is a drawing, the kinds of drawing that I do. It's only about 4 inches. And I don't put a lot of detail in drawings because I always feel like if I do a really detailed drawing, I feel like I've already made the piece and then I'm bored with it. So I don't want to go over and do it over again. So I don't put a lot of detail in it, and all the detail goes in as I'm actually making the piece. I put borders around all those pieces because I wanted to add more details to the that I couldn't put in the major piece. And as you can see in the top right-hand corner of that picture, I collected leaves from all of the trees and pressed them so that I had them to refer to when I was making some details. So another detail that you see in this piece is the leaves here in this corner. And those are actual, that's what the leaves look like. That's best that I could make them. The next one I'm talking about is flowering dogwood. Now, normally, flowering dogwood is portrayed in the spring because it has this beautiful white flower, but it also has a beautiful fall color. And I stuck with the red because there were 2 other details that I thought were interesting about it. First Nations people would make a decoction from the bark and the leaves that was used for heart medicine. And so that's why I put the heart at the bottom under there. And the bark actually produced a red dye. Now, when I did the research for this exhibition, I also did all the stuff that they talked about the trees. I tried to make the dyes. I tried to taste the branches. I did all that stuff. I tried to make the red dye from the bark of this tree, and it was basically just gray. So they knew a lot more about dyeing than they actually shared with us. I don't think red dye is being made with the bark anymore, but they managed to do it somehow. Saving Paradise was really well received. That exhibition toured to so many galleries, but it got me working on a whole string of native Canadian species that I thought were, local and also Canadian in general. Here are aspen and birch. So for these realistic landscapes, I use raw edge applique and machine embroidery, and I'm going to talk more details about that in the ensuing slides. But these are native species. I fell in love with I'm always falling in love with stuff. I love the arbutus tree, which lives out west on the coast. The amazing thing about this tree is, first of all, it is a broadleaf, non-deciduous tree. So it keeps its broad leaves all through the winter. And it seems to be able to resist salt. So it can grow right on the edge of the stones and everything. It has beautiful, beautiful shapes. So it's quite a sculptural tree. I tried many, many times to make this tree, and I thought, you know what, next time I'm out west, I'm going to go find some. So I went to Vancouver Island, and this is me in Nanaimo next to one of the trees. And this is the gorgeous bark of this tree. So I was collecting information about some of the trees that I do to get more detail and to make them more realistic and more, I don't know, just more true is what I was looking for. Another tree, the Gary Oak, this is taken by my friend Susan Duplan, who lives on Pender Island. The Gary Oak is a very endangered species of tree, and she took this photo of it, and I thought, well, I need to make one of those too. So this is my interpretation of Gary Oak. I like to portray particular trees too. This is the comfort maple that's in Pelham, Ontario, and that's near St. Catharines. This one is actually reported to be over 500 years old. That's a crazy, crazy age for a sugar maple. It's also incredibly huge. I mean, my car is right in the front there, but that's like, if I parked my car under there, it would be dwarfed. It is an absolutely gorgeous tree. It has gorgeous fall color, and it must have had lots of stories because 500 years ago, it would have been in the woods. So I portrayed the tree as with woods in the background, and then I have the land, the agricultural land in the foreground, which is its present location, and I put a door in the tree for all the stories that the tree might tell. This is one thing I love about being an artist is I can do what I want. If I want to put a door in a tree, I can. I just love that. It's like playing God, really. And local landscapes, we had a cottage up in Bruce Peninsula. So this is a typical sort of rocky, lakey, tree-y kind of piece. and this is a detail. So you'll see in this detail that I've got the water is actually not made up of fabric. It's made up of yarns, novelty yarns that I just lay down. And actually I lay them down I just throw them down basically. And I move them around until they look good. And then I put netting on top, stitch over that, and then stitch over it again. So you get that idea of freedom really in the work. My main technique is called raw edge applique. And as you can see in the rocks, I don't turn the edges under. I don't do any of the technical stuff like a traditional quilter does. In fact, I've never made a traditional quilt and I wouldn't know how to do one. I totally respect anyone who does. But turning all those edges under and getting corners square and all that kind of thing really isn't my thing. This works a lot better for me. And here's another, this was for a commission. The people I do commissions all the time. People send me photos of things. Sometimes they have ideas. This was a photo that was sent of an island on in La Cloche area, which is north of Manitoulin Island. And when they sent me the picture and asked me to make this piece, I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to be on Manitoulin. I might as well go up north and see what this little island looks like. I found the spot. We're looking across the lake. We can't see this island. And I look down and I see this little like 3-foot bump. Basically, that was the island. So they took it from an angle, so it looked huge, but it was really more like, I don't know. It was just a tiny little thing. So it made me laugh. And I made it look big, just like they did on their picture. And this is something that, people really love. They sort of identify with a spot and they go back to it every time. And it's very meaningful to them. And I hope that I captured that for them. I mean, to me, they look like bonsai trees. It's all a matter of perspective. And again, this is another little tiny tree. This is Fairy Lake on Vancouver Island. David Hutchinson is a photographer on the left. Somebody asked me to do a piece based on that. I asked his permission, of course, and I paid the fee to use the photo for inspiration for a piece. And this is a piece that I came up with for that. The person who ordered the piece didn't like it. She kept wanting to change the background, the color. And I said, you know what? I think you should contact the photographer and have him make a print for you, which is what she did. And then a few days later, somebody else bought it from me. So I was very happy. Everybody was happy. When I take on commissions, I never take a deposit and I never force someone to take the piece that's finished, unless, of course, it's site specific and special shape and all that kind of thing. But that way, I still have freedom to do what I want to do. And I want the people who own my work to really love my work. And if they felt forced to buy something of mine, then nobody would be happy. I wouldn't be happy and neither would they. So I don't do that. Now, Kathy mentioned that I now live in Dundas, which is in the escarpment area. I actually live kind of at the top. I don't live right in Dundas. I'm sort of above the valley. And when I go down into Dundas, I see a scene just like this. Actually, it would look a little bit more snowy right now because the snow is really coming down. But I see this every day. And this is so different from where I grew up, because where I grew up was completely flat. This is gorgeous rock everywhere. And I thought it was very, very inspirational. So I started making pieces that were based on the Niagara Escarpment. This is one of the pieces here. So this allowed me to use different kinds of fabrics in different ways, different backgrounds, different kinds of stitching. And it just opened up a whole other avenue of work for me. I wanted these pieces to be about triumph over adversity, because where I grew up, you can just throw something in the ground upside down and it'll grow. But here is a really hard work for a seed to get established and to grow. But even with these harsh conditions, some of these trees go on to live hundreds of years. Actually, on our escarpment are arguably the oldest trees in Canada. And yet they're just the thickness of my wrist. So, they are enduring kinds of trees. This is a photo that someone sent me from a scene that's on the in the Bruce Peninsula, and the place is called Cave Point. They took this from the water and they asked me to make a piece that was inspired by this piece. So this is what I made for them. And you'll see here in a couple of places, I put tree rings here, here, and there's another spot somewhere. It's probably hidden by the pictures that I see in the corner there. Oh, here's another one. Because I wanted to honor those very old trees that are living there. I think the oldest was like that they found so far is 13, 14, 1500 years old. So that's really important. And this is a little bit more also Georgian Bay area, but I'm getting a little bit more abstract here with my colors. And there's a detail there for you to see the stitching. So working with roots and rocks made me think a lot more about what's going on under the ground. And that's a limestone outcropping cross section. But what I really love about this idea is that what lies beneath is every bit as important as what we see on the surface. And it's the same way we experience knowing another person. What we see on the surface is never as complex and rich as what's beneath the surface. So this is like a lot of the pieces that I do are not just about trees, they're about people. They're about me sometimes, about how I feel. And so the trees are a way of expressing that without actually making a portrait in a way. I like to show the cyclical movements of the organisms and the processes under the ground. Even in winter, there's a lot going on under our feet. And I'm really inspired by literature as well. This is a quote from Margaret Atwood's book, The Year of the Flood, which I just finished rereading now. When I read this quote, when next you hold a handful of moist soil, compost, say a silent prayer of thanks to all of the earth's previous creatures. Picture your fingers giving each and one of them a loving squeeze, for they're surely here with us, ever present in that nourishing matrix. It makes me think of my dad, the farmer, who'd go out into the field in the spring and pick up a handful of soil and squeeze it and smell it because he loved the land so much. And this love of the land is what I'd like to express also with these pieces. Another quote that's very, very inspirational to me is being imagined is the first step to existence. And this is a Polish poet, Olga Tokarczuk. I've easily made 40, 50 pieces based on just that quote because it inspired me so much. And this piece she provides, this was an invitational exhibition with the theme of minerals. And normally we'd think about precious metals like stones like gold and emeralds and that kind of thing. And I thought, what about the minerals that are under the soil that the plants take up? Because actually when the plants take up minerals from the soil and we eat the plants, they take up residence in our bodies. And that's got to be pretty important. I mean, I'd say that's more important than emeralds and diamonds in the long run. And so this is what I want to speak about with this piece. I'm going to show you a detail here. There's a lot going on underneath there. The minerals, the root taking it up, and then all those minerals showing up in the leaves of the tree. All right, so we are going to skip over to fantasy. As I was saying before, I like putting, doors and trees and all kinds of things like this. And why can't I? Nobody's telling me that I can't do these things. So I've made quite a few pieces that are kind of how I feel sometimes. This can be interpreted in different ways. Everybody who looks at it thinks, oh, that tree is really precarious, or that tree is very safe, or, they have all different ideas, or maybe they relate to it, and maybe they don't. I've made quite a few pieces like that. And jumping off of that is this one. That one's called The Balance, and that was for an exhibition called Burlington Urban Rural, which was an invitational exhibition at the Art Gallery of Burlington. I was talking about that tension between nature and the urban environment, and it struck me that the condos look a lot like the layers of rock in the escarpment, and why don't I play around with that a little bit? And I love doing windows and doors. And I thought, well, probably an elevator would be suitable here as well. So I add those in. And that tree is actually modeled on one of the heritage trees that they have right in Burlington. It's a big white oak. So making those windows and doors led to all kinds of trouble. Yeah. So I thought, well, maybe I can put a house in a tree because I've always loved tree houses. And, now that I'm a little bit older, I want my house to have, all the amenities. It's got a full, three-piece bathroom and a beautiful kitchen and everything else. So this is a kind of tree house that I'm happy to live in now. I made I don't know, maybe 30 of these different little variations of these trees. Sometimes they're in a forest, sometimes they're just, on the top of a tree. And why can't I make a tree fly? The story behind this one is a couple in Dundas here who were given a tree when they were married, and they kept moving and they couldn't leave that tree behind. So they kept moving the tree with them along with the bird feeder and everything else. So I thought, well, I'll make this piece for them to honor their tree. And yeah, it's still living in Dundas right now, as far as I know. So I have lots of fun with it. And also there's serious things. During the pandemic, feeling isolated, I thought, wow, an iceberg with a tree on it. Kind of a mournful piece, but also something that I could relate to and probably other people could too. And there's a detail in there so you can see I'm using some translucent fabrics in there as well to represent the water. And who doesn't want to see a bunch of balloons in a tree? I mean, I did. And I thought, well, I might as well make that. So that's one of my favorite pieces so far of the fantasy ones. Okay, so and this, if you look at this tree and you look at this tree, you can see where my inspiration is from. That's my own apple tree that was on the property when we moved here. It was a mess when we moved here, the branches on the ground and everything, and it took about 6 years to get it looking like this again, which is the proper way that one of these old Macintosh apple trees should look when they've been pruned properly. This I took just our first snow this year. And this is my studio. So I'm lucky enough to have a standalone studio on my property, which you are welcome to visit. I hope that you will. Just let me know in advance to make sure I'm there. I love having company. And inside is my desk and all my fabrics and everything. And this is what it looks like when I'm actually working on something. It's rarely that neat looking as you saw before. But I try to put everything away at the end of every project to make it sort of go back to ground zero in a way. I get my fabrics from everywhere. I, of course, fabric stores, thrift stores. I did a whole series of pieces just with men's button-down shirts. People who sew give me their leftovers. I go to garage sales. There aren't very many places you can't find fabric, in fact, so it's kind of a medium that's available, and I'm always looking. This is how I store the bigger pieces. And then, of course, I end up with lots of small bits, and I don't like to throw those away because you can always use the small bits, right? So I've got bags and bags of those small bits as well. And as far as threads and yarns and that, I've got baskets of those as well. Threads for the sewing machine and also fancy yarns for water, as you saw before, and other things. And that's me at my sewing machine. So at the very beginning, I did everything by hand. I did hand embroidery, as I told you, it was kits and that kind of thing. Needlepoint, crewel, fine embroidery, white work. I did all those things. And I loved it, but I found that the kinds of designs that I wanted to do and the number of designs that I wanted to do was way more than I was able to do if I was going to do it all by hand. So I started to devise some methods to do it with the sewing machine, get the same effect. And so over a course of maybe 10 years or so, actually I'm still working on techniques, on changing techniques in that. I developed these different ideas on how to work. And and I didn't want to quit using fabric. People say, why don't you just paint then? Wouldn't that be easier? Well, two things. I didn't know how to paint. And I'd never painted before, and I actually tried to paint and I couldn't. Like sitting in front of a blank canvas is terrifying. I have a lot of respect for painters. I start with fabric. I throw fabric down and I've got something to start with. So, I think fabric was just maybe in my blood or something, but I'm definitely not a painter. And yeah, so I'm going to show you my machine. There's nothing fancy in this machine. As you can see, it's a very old one. It's probably 45, getting on to 50 years old now. I bought it secondhand when I lived in London, and it's my right and left arm. It's everything. And what's amazing about this machine is it's got a 3-horsepower motor. It can go through all the layers. And if something gets wrong or stuck, I can sometimes stick a fork in it and get it going again. I don't have to send it somewhere 2 weeks away to, get it fixed. It always works. You can see in the back there, my other machine is also a Bernina. It's not that much younger. It's about, I don't know, 30 years old or so. And that does my household sewing. So I've got 2 machines, and that's nothing computerized about what I do. So what's nice about my machine is that I can do what's called free motion embroidery, which means I can lower the feed dogs at the bottom and I can go in any direction I want with the needle. So it's kind of like drawing, but in reverse. Instead of with my hand moving and drawing, my substrate moves. So after like many years of practicing, you get pretty good at doing that, which is kind of working in reverse in a way. And I can do pretty well anything I draw first, I can do in fabric. You can use a zigzag, you can use a straight stitch with this, but basically I lay down a bunch of pieces of fabric, I pin them down, and then I stitch the edges down with the free motion attachment of my machine. After I've stitched those layers down, I embellish. So you can see the little circles in there. You can see that I'm working on some trees. I may not paint, but I do a lot of drawing. Drawing is really, really important in my work, and I will go out and draw trees. Every single kind of tree has a completely different way of being drawn. I actually did a residency in Joshua Tree National Park in California quite a few years ago. And drawing the Joshua tree was a completely different experience than drawing the trees that we have here. And then there's evergreens versus deciduous trees. They're all different. So the more I draw, the better I get at doing it. And I do that straight onto the fabric. So most of the time. And this is the finished piece. So I do a lot of circular pieces now. I didn't show those in my previous slides because I don't know, there's so many different subjects to cover that I couldn't do that, but I do circular pieces for lots of different reasons, but this is one of the circular ones. This is just a tiny one, 6 by 6 inches. And as for crowns of trees, sometimes what I do, okay, this part here is actually made up of lots of tiny bits of fabric, which I'm going to show in a couple of slides that are coming up. But this leaf in the corner here is actually a stitched design, but I painted the inside with Inktense pencils. Inktense pencils it's like paint pencils or watercolor pencils, but it actually has ink inside it, so they're permanent, which is really neat. And that adds a lot of, to color in tiny areas, it's really important for me. And then in these areas here around the edge where you see it's slightly darker, I use acrylic paint that's mixed with water, and then I brush it on. So that gives you a little bit more depth, like in this area as well here. So it makes things stand out a little bit more. So yes, I do use a little bit of paint in my work. So coming up to the cutting up, I use all kinds of fabrics in those crowns of the trees. I start with a mixture of fabric and threads. Those are DMC cottons, embroidery cottons, or I use novelty yarns, anything that's the right colors. And then I cut them all up really, really fine. So it's kind of like paint in a way. It's like a little cloud of color. I lay them down on a substrate, their background, and I might put in some trunks or whatever. I might draw them in later, but here, just to show you, I put in the trunks. And then I put translucent tulle on top. So this is tulle, wedding tulle, basically, but it comes in lots of different colors, or you can dye it as well. I lay it on top like that, and you can see the tulle here a little bit better. And then I pin it all down. And then I stitch on top. So I stitch through all those layers, and you can see why I need a 3 horsepower motor, because sometimes it's going through quite a lot of layers. I stitch through all the layers to hold it down, and then I cut away the excess netting. And then I stitch back on top of it again with different colors, sometimes black, just to give it more depth. So you get a result that's kind of like this. So these trees were made exactly that way, except I already had a background there. That background is made of strips of fabric that have been laid down, stitched down. And the foreground is made of lots of strips of fabric again that have been stitched down. And then the trees on top. And I know what you're going to ask. How long does it take? And every artist sort of like, I don't know, I don't know how long it takes. They're pretty labor intensive. I never calculate the number of hours it takes to make a piece, because at some level, I don't think I really want to know. But it's kind of irrelevant, because I have made pieces that I spent millions of hours on that were real duds. And then I made some pieces that were really quick that were marvelous. So the amount of time is I guess that doesn't really register as an important thing for me. I love every minute that I'm working on these pieces, even the framing. Like I really like doing all the steps, the designing, the making, the framing, everything. So yeah, this is kind of a little bit about this. I think I've reached the end here. There we go. Okay. So these are some books that I would recommend you read if you're interested in trees or trees and art. Suzanne Simard is one of my heroes. She wrote Finding the Mother Tree, which is, I did a whole series of pieces on, which I couldn't show you here because that's a whole other talk. Lab Girl is a really interesting story by a really good writer who also happens to be a scientist. So it's a good one. The Overstory is an award-winning book. If you know about books about trees, then you've probably heard of the Overstory. It's a giant book. Give yourself some time. Maybe read it over the winter or something. And Canadian Embroiderers Guild, that's the link. You can find out more about them and what's going on with them. I really recommend you approaching them if you're interested in just having fun with fabric. Okay, so I'm going to stop screen sharing now. How do I do that? Stop. There we go. Okay. And does anyone, there are probably lots of questions while I was talking. I didn't see that part of it. So if you have any questions, I'm ready to answer.
There are no questions in the chat right now. There are lots of comments coming in the chat, but this is your chance to find your reactions icon and raise your hand if you have a question for Lorraine, and she will call out your name, and then you'll need to unmute as you talk to her.
Okay, and Steckley Diaz.
Hi. I am also a member of the Embroidery Guild, and it's all what you said. It's all that, and the teacher's amazing, and they share their ideas, and they're just wonderful. Yeah, my comment, I love your work. I think it's fantastic. My comments are, I love seeing your studio. The way you stored your fabric just in bags, it's not folded neatly and organized, just in bags, I just love that. That just inspired me, because mine are in sort of see-through boxes and stuff like that. I just love it. And I'm so interested in you sharing how you cut the fabric really small and do it that way. And I'm taking a class with Linda Watson. I don't know if you know Linda Watson. And
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, she's one of the she's doing one on background, like making your background for your piece, and I think that would be very helpful. The way you did that, and I saw your work at the gallery in town. I didn't make it to the World of Threads, but it's funny because it came up on my Instagram this morning, the World of Threads, and it's all your stuff.
Oh.
That was really, weird and interesting.
Well, what happened with the World of Threads is that they had to close for a month because of a strike, and then they let them.
Yeah.
And so some of the artists had to withdraw their work because they couldn't, they couldn't deal with the extension. So they asked me to fill in some of the spots, and of course, I happen to have a few pieces.
A few pieces. Well, I just love, and you're doing a talk for our guild, so I'll hear some of it again, but I'll still listen because it'll be interesting no matter what.
I look forward to
thank you. Thank you.
Suad Badri, yes.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
And Happy New Year to all. I'm very happy to be here. This is wonderful. This is amazing, actually, because I'm into sewing myself. I started very early at the age of 12, and my whole family are they all into sewing. So my mother taught me, and then my sister followed on. And so I'm in love with fabric. I also paint on fabric. And I come from Sudan, where we put lots of layers of clothes on. And we try to make it bright, colorful, and with lots of stitching and paintings on those stuff we put on. So I'm very happy. I enjoyed every minute of this presentation, and I really would like to see more. So my question is, do you exhibit somewhere? Do you have an exhibition?
Go to my website, and you'll see there's a page there with upcoming events. So if something is happening, then yes, I always post it. I try to keep my website pretty well up to date. So yeah, it's right now they're at a lot of pieces are at the World of Threads Festival. Unfortunately, that closes on Sunday, but that's in Oakville. Where are you located, Suad?
Hamilton.
Hamilton.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, you're just around the corner then. How wonderful.
Yes.
Okay, well,
I hope we can see each other also one day soon.
Yeah, that would be lovely. Okay.
Because I'm leading, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm leading a sewing circle for immigrants, new arrivals, and women from Syria, Africa, and they're really into this culturally, and now they want to carry on that. So I'd like to pick your mind on certain ways of how I can train them well.
Wonderful, then let's get in touch.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And can I just add that Suad is one of the community consultants in our seniors ArtLink project and was part of our research team through Hamilton, McMaster, and Guelph, and has been involved with creativity and older adults with us for a while. And one of the things that Suad did was to have her mother do a doll with fabric and videotaped it so she could share some of her cultural background and some of the traditional fabric work that they were doing, using video and internet and everything to share that with everyone. So that was quite amazing. Thanks, Suad.
And it is still available for anyone who would like to check on that on the Center 3 and the seniors link as well.
Yes. Thank you.
Lorraine, I'm just going to jump in with one of the questions that's in the chat. Becky is just wondering what types of fabric you use as your background to start with.
Oh, the backgrounds are exactly the same as the foregrounds. I use all kinds of fabric. I forgot to mention that. I use cottons, plain cottons, printed cottons, silks. I use synthetics also, anything that's the right color. I don't use really thick fabrics like upholstery fabrics and that kind of thing, because then it really does get too thick. But yeah, I use all kinds and I get them from everywhere. But sorry, I forget the first part of that question. Is that
no, just kind of fabrics you're using as your background?
Oh, for the backgrounds. The background. Yeah, the backgrounds is the same as the foregrounds. I use everything in the background. I use everything in the foreground. So yeah, just whatever works, basically.
And then another question that's very similar to that is there's lots of layers. So how do you create a base that stays stable without warping?
Oh, that's a really good question. Okay, so I go to the thrift store and I buy sheets, like just white sheets. And I lay, like, sometimes put 2 layers, sometimes just one, depending on how much I think there's going to be on there. I don't use embroidery hoops to stretch the fabric. People who only work with thin layers will use an embroidery hoop, which is a great idea. But I work too big. I can't do an embroidery hoop for a big piece, right? So I try to stabilize it as best I can with using a thicker fabric at the bottom, like beneath everything. So I start with that layer of sheet, and then sometimes put another sheet, and then a background color, like that's the main color. And then after that, I start adding things on top. And that seems to hold it together. And sometimes it is a bit wrinkly. I don't mind the wrinkles. I don't mind the fraying. I don't, all those things help to make the fabric look richer. When you're making a traditional quilt, you need to turn the edges under, because obviously you're going to be washing it and you don't want it fraying and that. So that's why you do that. But for my work, which is for the wall, and it just only needs, like, you only need to vacuum them to clean them, basically, because they're good and sturdy. You don't have to worry about things like that. So yeah, it's just basically all throwing fabrics down, pinning them down, and stitching them. And by the way, I don't use glue, and I don't use any other kind of substrate in there. I only use pins to hold everything down.
Okay. And another question is, can you speak to framing your pieces?
Oh yeah. If I was giving my woven woods talk, which is all about round pieces, if it's a round quilt, I have an actual picture of that, but I'm afraid I don't have access to it from here. I put a sleeve that follows around the top edge of the back. At the back, the sleeve is put on, and then I get these hula hoops from the thrift or from the dollar store, and I cut the hula hoop and I slide that into the sleeve, and that sort of stabilizes the top of the piece. And then I put a bar across the back. So I made 12 of these large round wall hangings for a touring exhibition that went across the country called Woven Woods, based on Suzanne Simard's work, Dr. Suzanne Simard's work. And those pieces held up really well through that whole thing because of that bar. And then the other round pieces, like the little ones, they're just framed, like they have a square background. So I framed them the way that I frame other pieces. Anyone, any other questions? I don't see any others. I don't have everybody here, so I don't see any hands. Okay.
Do we have any, Maggie, can you check all the profile pics and see if there's any?
I've checked the chat and I've checked both screens, and I'm not seeing any raised hands at this point. So if you can't find your reactions button, then just turn your camera on and wave at us, and then we know you have a question for Lorraine. That always works.
Lorraine, do you still use hand embroidery? I know that the free motion sewing machine embroidery just opens up a whole other world. But do you still just love to sit there with your piece in your lap and listen to music and just stitch by hand? There's a real movement of slow stitching, and that's, sort of slows people down and gets into the moment of just doing one stitch at a time. Is that still a part of your practice?
Yeah. When I have some in the future, when I have some spare time, I will. I love it. I do, but I haven't made any pieces with hand stitching in a really long time. Yeah. But it's there, it's always waiting for me. I've got lots of threads that I could use and everything, but yeah. So very much
one question I had, and I think I've run into it a little bit myself, but when you're so immersed in your creative practice as you are, and with people with painting or whatever, you're just compelled to keep producing, whether you sell your pieces or not. You just always want to be making a new piece or trying a new idea. How do you store all of the work that you create that you don't sell? Do you or do you sell most of it, or do you have some kind of storage facility at your studio?
I actually pretty well sell everything. I'm really lucky. But the other thing that I do is I also follow a lot of auctions and that kind of thing. There are some charitable fundraising auctions and that. So if I've got an older piece that's been sitting around for quite a while, people say artists should never enter auctions and that. I don't believe that. Like I don't give them new work unless it's specifically called for. But they always find homes, and I'm always happy to let them go. And plus, it helps to raise money for good causes. So yeah, I don't hang on to old pieces, and I don't hang on to half finished pieces. I either finish them or dump it. I don't have stuff that's left behind. Yeah, I feel that kind of holds you back, having all that stuff around. So yeah. Oh, I see somebody. Becky Menzies has a question. Hi.
It worked. Hi. Your story of how you evolved from start to now has just been really fascinating to hear. I'm just curious, where do you see yourself moving forward now? Or will that be based on a theme that you will move towards, or is there a technique or something that you want to try? So I'm just curious to know sort of how you're keeping your learning fresh and where you think you might be heading next. Thanks.
Well, thank you for asking. I'm going to share a screen for just one more slide. Oh, if I can find it there. Okay. Okay. So this is an exhibition that I've got that's touring right now. It's called Living Language Land. Each one of those pieces is 27 pieces in all in this collection. Each of those pieces is based on an indigenous word somewhere in the world. The collection of the words wasn't done by me. That was done by somebody else. It's called, you see the link there, Living Language Land, which is on my website. And there's lots of research that was done on each of these words. And then my job was to create an image to go with each one of those words. And so that exhibition is now starting to tour. It's at the World of Threads Festival right now. And I do a talk about this particular grouping of pieces, which is like, the whole project just blew me away. And it started me in thinking about a whole bunch of different things that I may go on with. But yeah, so that's kind of what's got my mind focusing on right now. I just finished one of the busiest years of my life last year. I had 3 exhibitions going on at the same time, and it was exhausting. And I don't want to do that again. So I'm going to just sort of go with this one and maybe have a few little spin-offs from it. But yeah, that's kind of what I've been thinking about a lot lately. This idea of indigenous words and language, as I said before, poetry and literature really, and the roots of words really interest me. And this, when you think about roots and trees and everything too, it's the same. Like, I mean, those things come together really, really well, and they do in this collection as well. So thanks for that question.
There's a couple of other questions that have now popped up.
Oh, okay.
Do you ever use batting or backing, or are all of your pieces using that same background that you talked about, starting with the sheet?
Oh, the background is for framed pieces and for wall hangings. So I make quilted wall hangings, which have batting in them. That's a cotton batting that I use inside them. But when they're framed pieces, they don't need cotton batting. They just get stretched onto canvas and then put into a frame. Okay. So the background is exactly the same for either, except the quilt material goes in between if it's a quilt. So. And
one of the other questions is, do you offer classes?
I retired from teaching about 12 years ago, but I'm very happy to answer questions. Like if somebody emails me, like go to my website, you've got contact and everything. I'm very happy to answer questions and help out if you've got questions or you're stuck somewhere or you want to know where to start or whatever. Yeah.
Okay.
Can I add here, just Maggie, for a minute, that tomorrow evening we have an evening workshop session planned, and we're going to be covering raw edge textile, patchworking, and quilting. So and that's also can be applied to making backgrounds for doing composition. So just to get people used to using raw edge fabric and raw edge textiles. So that would be tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock our time here in Canada, in the Great Lakes area. But they're with Lorraine not sort of offering workshops, I think a few people are going to be stepping up just to start teaching the skills for those building blocks on how to do raw edge work, applique, and quilting and patches and some of that.
That sounds neat. Yeah, I think Polly has a question. Polly Mulvey?
I do.
Yes. Okay.
Hi. So I'm down in Oregon, and I do silk lampshades and a lot of beading, and that's my textile art. And I'm wondering, have you done a book? I'm so unfamiliar with. I left quilting when I realized I could actually make lampshades and fund my little enterprise. So I'm unfamiliar, but do you have a book?
I've done a couple of books of exhibitions that I've done, but they don't have
Okay.
techniques in them. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I just really appreciate what you have to say. I have friends who are doing stuff like that. I'm just standing in front of one of mine.
Oh, gorgeous.
But
wow.
I did smocking, and then I do a lot of beading with old beads and layering. But everything for me has to have light. Oops, come on back. Has to have light coming through it. And I love the quilting that I've done before you put the backing on, and I'd hold it up. And it's like, oh, the light would come through it, and it just excited me.
Yes. Yeah. I've noticed that before too, like a light coming through. I did one piece like that a long time ago that was see-through also for an exhibition. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, I understand that feeling. So yeah, well, again, if you have questions, you're welcome to email me anytime. So
okay, I'll find your website. And I have friends who are doing your kind of work, and it's like, oh, they probably know all about you. But I just found it so inspiring. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Polly. Nice to meet you.
Okay, Lorraine, another question for you.
Okay.
Can you tell us about your work being highlighted in the film, The Fabric of Christmas?
That just happened out of the blue. The director's wife happened to be into quilting, and they lived in Hamilton, and they were looking for, first of all, that like the original script for the movie, which is a Christmas rom-com basically, was a woman who was doing portraits of pets on fabric, and sadly they couldn't find portraits of pets on fabric, or at least not enough of them, and nobody who actually did that. And so they decided they'll just look around for any quilter, right? And so she happened to know about me, so they came to my studio and they said, yes, let's use this. So they changed the whole script. So it ended up being about a young woman who is an art quilter, and of course, she falls in love with the nice looking man, the firefighter of the small village, kind of thing. But they had rented 4 quilts from me, and it's a paid gig. I had to figure out how much they pay artists for use of their art in movies, and it's a thing. So I found out how that works, and they borrowed my quilts, and then months later, here's this movie. So I actually went to the private screening of it in Toronto a few weeks ago with the cast, who I had not met. And it was so much fun because they're all young, they're all tall, they're all beautiful. and they're also humble. So the whole experience was quite amazing. Sadly, it was only released in the US formally, but it was purchased by someone in Canada. So I have a feeling it's going to be shown in Canada more openly next year. I mean, you can get pirated versions and all that, but I mean, this year's Christmas, we'll probably be able to see it in Canada. But yeah, it was fun. Unexpected kind of thing. So.
Kathy, there are a number of questions for you about the workshop tomorrow evening and how can people access it if they have not registered? Is there still room? Is it full? Where can they find the link, et cetera, those kinds of questions.
Could you put my get Kathy Smith at Gmail address in the chat? And if people email, I can just send them the link to start the for them for tomorrow evening. So can you do that, Maggie? Get Kathy Smith at gmail.com.
It's done. It's there.
Okay. Yeah. So that's good. So there's room and people can drop in, and I'll just start with the basic building blocks to get people going if they want to try that as a creative practice. Yes. So anything else? Any last words from people? Any comments you want to share? If you want to give your last comments or thoughts or thank yous or appreciations for Lorraine.
Lorraine, the chat is endlessly full of.
You know, I'm reading these and I think, thank you so much for these amazing comments. I'm so like, oh my gosh. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
I had a really good time.
We should do a road trip down to Lorraine's studio. We'll just get a convoy happening here.
That'd be great because we also have Carnegie Gallery in Dundas, which is, they have my work, but they have lots of local artists' work as well. So it's not just me. You could sort of, and have a really lovely lunch in Dundas, which they have great restaurants.
Do you have enough land so we could bring our camping gear and tent?
Yes, I do actually. I do. I have half an acre of property, so yeah, we can fit you all. We'll figure it out.
Road trip.
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be, we're looking forward to seeing you. We continue to build our Seniors ArtLink online community.